I used to believe that money was something you had to pursue directly. Set a number, chase it, push harder when it felt far away. That belief shaped many of my decisions, how I worked, how I measured progress, even how I judged myself, and for a while, it seemed logical. More effort should lead to more reward. More hours should translate into more income, more ambition should produce more money. But the longer I stayed inside that logic, the more something felt off. Not dramatically wrong, just quietly exhausting. Money would come and go, but never settle. Progress felt real on paper, yet unstable in life. And the more tightly I focused on money as a target, the more fragile everything around it became. That was the first signal. Not that money was bad, but that money was reacting to something deeper than effort. The real shift began when I stopped asking, "How do I make more money?" and started asking a different question. What does money actually respond to? That question changes everything, because money does not have emotions. It does not reward struggle. It does not respond to desperation, nor does it punish comfort. Money follows structure. It follows clarity. It follows alignment between who you are, what you create, and how you decide. Once I understood that, the chase ended. Not because ambition disappeared, but because direction became clearer. This audiobook is not about earning tricks or income tactics. It's about the rules that quietly shape financial outcomes over time. Rules that don't announce themselves. Rules that don't trend. Rules that don't promise quick results. But rules that work. I've learned that money behaves less like a prize and more like a shadow. You don't catch it by running after it. You notice it when you walk in the right direction long enough. That's why I say money is a byproduct. It is the result of how you think, how you choose, and how you design your life. Not the objective that organizes everything else around it. When money becomes the goal, decisions shrink. They shorten time horizons. They trade durability for speed. When money becomes the byproduct, decisions expand. They prioritize sustainability, leverage, and coherence. They allow patience to compound quietly. This distinction matters more than any tactic. Because wealth, in its stable form, is not built through intensity. It's built through consistency, guided by correct principles. I didn't arrive at these rules by theory alone. They emerged slowly, through patterns observed, mistakes repeated, and outcomes that refused to be explained by effort alone. At some point, the pattern became impossible to ignore. Whenever decisions were aligned with long-term value, money followed, often indirectly, sometimes unexpectedly, but consistently. Whenever decisions were driven primarily by money itself, instability followed just as reliably. That's not coincidence. That's law. And laws don't negotiate. This audiobook lays out 8 rules, not as advice, but as observations of how wealth actually behaves. You won't find motivation here. You won't find pressure. You won't be told to work harder, hustle longer, or sacrifice more. You'll be invited to look at money differently, to see it not as something to be extracted from the world, but as something that emerges when your actions make sense within a larger system. Each rule in this audiobook points back to the same core truth. Money flows toward clarity. It avoids contradiction. It accumulates where patience and structure exist together. Wealth is not a personality trait. It's not luck. And it's not reserved for a specific background. Wealth is a skill, and like any skill, it has rules. Ignore them, and effort turns into friction. Understand them, and progress becomes quieter, but more certain. These rules are not meant to impress you. They are meant to orient you, to help you stop mistaking motion for direction, to help you stop measuring success only by immediate outcomes, to help you design a financial life that doesn't require constant force to maintain. If you listen carefully, you may notice something subtle happening as you move through these chapters. Pressure will decrease. Decisions will feel cleaner. Time will start working with you instead of against you. Not because anything magical is happening, but because alignment always feels lighter than resistance. By the end of this audiobook, the goal's not for you to want money more. It's for money to make more sense. And when money makes sense, it knows exactly where to go. Chapter 1. What you aim at determines what you attract. For a long time, I believed progress was a matter of intensity. If something didn't move, I assumed it needed more force. More hours, more pressure, more urgency. Direction, however, was rarely questioned. Only later did I realize that money does not respond to force. It responds to orientation. This is the quiet truth behind every lasting financial outcome. Money moves toward what makes sense, not toward what shouts the loudest. What you aim at shapes everything that follows. Your decisions, your tolerance for risk, your sense of timing, even the way you interpret success and failure. When the aim is money itself, the system becomes fragile. Not immediately, but inevitably, money as a goal compresses time. It pulls decisions closer to the present moment, shrinking perspective. Shorter horizons invite shortcuts. Shortcuts erode structure, and without structure, nothing stays stable for long. I've seen this pattern repeat too consistently to ignore. Whenever my focus narrowed to money as an outcome, the results felt unstable, even when they were positive. Gains arrived quickly but demanded constant attention. Momentum required maintenance. Progress felt conditional. The aim was clear, but the direction was shallow. The shift came when I stopped asking whether an action would produce money and began asking whether it made sense within a longer arc. Not emotionally, structurally. Would this still be worth doing if results arrived slowly? Would this still hold if external conditions changed? Would this still matter if attention disappeared? Those questions changed my aim. And when the aim changed, everything downstream reorganized itself. Money stopped being something to chase and became something that followed. Direction operates like gravity. It doesn't rush, it doesn't argue, it simply pulls outcomes toward it over time. When direction is coherent, money drifts closer without effort. When direction is confused, money keeps its distance regardless of intensity. This is not philosophy, it's mechanics. Money avoids contradiction. It does not like systems that require constant justification. It does not settle where logic collapses under pressure. It does not remain where decisions conflict with one another. Direction removes contradiction. When you know what you are building, decisions align. When decisions align, systems stabilize. When systems stabilize, money begins to behave predictably. Predictability is underrated. Predictability is where peace enters the financial equation. Direction also determines patience. When the aim is shallow, waiting feels like loss. When the aim is deep, waiting feels like investment. This distinction alone changes behavior more than any strategy. I noticed that once my aim shifted away from money and toward value that could exist independently of it, time stopped feeling like an enemy. I no longer needed immediate confirmation that I was winning. The work itself became the signal. Direction replaced motivation. That's an important point. Motivation is unstable. Direction is not. Motivation fluctuates with mood and outcome. Direction remains intact regardless of feedback. Money trusts direction far more than motivation. Direction also filters opportunity. Without it, everything looks attractive. With it, only what aligns remains visible. This is why clarity often precedes wealth. Not because clarity produces money directly, but because clarity prevents dispersion. Scattered effort cannot compound. Focused direction can. When direction is unclear, money must be actively managed. When direction is clear, money integrates naturally. The difference is subtle but profound. One requires constant vigilance, the other requires consistency. Consistency compounds quietly. Direction also shapes identity. When you aim at money, identity becomes negotiable. Values bend, boundaries soften. Decisions become reactive. When you aim at coherence, identity stabilizes. Choices reinforce one another. Money becomes compatible rather than central. Compatibility matters. Money does not need to be central to be present. In fact, it performs better when it isn't. This is why environments built solely around money feel tense, and environments built around meaning often feel abundant, even before they are. Direction answers a question money never can. What are you willing to repeat for a long time without immediate reward? The answer reveals everything, because what you can repeat calmly is what eventually attracts resources. Money follows repetition that makes sense. This is also why shortcuts feel tempting but rarely endure. They move quickly but lack gravity. They rise without roots. Direction creates roots. Roots don't rush, they anchor, and anchored systems attract capital, not instantly, not dramatically, but steadily enough to change your relationship with money entirely. When direction is correct, outcomes feel less personal. Wins don't inflate the ego. Losses don't destabilize identity. Everything becomes part of a larger movement. This emotional neutrality is not detachment, it's alignment. Aligned direction creates emotional regulation, and emotional regulation creates better decisions. Better decisions attract better outcomes. The chain is simple, but it cannot be rushed. Money respects time when time respects structure. Direction is not about certainty. It's about commitment to coherence. You don't need to know every step. You only need to know what you are no longer willing to contradict. When direction is set, money adapts. When direction wavers, money hesitates. That is the law. And once you understand it, you stop asking how fast you can move and start asking whether where you're going is worth arriving at. Because in the end, money does not reward motion, it rewards meaning sustained over time. And that is why what you aim at always determines what you attract. Chapter 2. You don't earn money. You express who you are. For a long time, I thought income was a reward, a fair exchange between effort and outcome. Do more, get more. That belief felt reasonable. It was also incomplete. Money does not arrive as a judgment on how hard you try. It arrives as a reflection of who you are, being while you try. This distinction changes everything. Income is not something you earn in isolation. It is something that expresses your identity over time. The way you think, the way you decide, the way you handle uncertainty, pressure, and responsibility. All of it leaks into your financial results. Money doesn't ask how busy you are. It asks what you represent. This is uncomfortable at first, because identity feels personal and money feels external. We like to keep those two separate, but they are inseparable. Every stable income stream is attached to a stable identity. Every volatile income stream reflects an unstable one. I noticed this only after watching patterns repeat. Whenever my sense of self was unclear, my finances mirrored that confusion. I hesitated, second-guessed, overcorrected. Money behaved the same way. When my identity solidified, money followed suit. Not instantly, but unmistakably. Identity determines how you show up when no one is watching. It determines what you tolerate, what you avoid, what you repeat. Money responds to repetition far more than intention. If your identity is reactive, income becomes reactive. If your identity is grounded, income stabilizes. This is why trying to earn more without evolving identity feels like strain. You're asking outcomes to exceed the container they live in. And containers matter. Identity is a container. It holds decisions together. It sets boundaries. It defines what feels natural and what feels forced. Money flows more easily into containers that don't leak. Leakage happens when actions contradict self-perception, when decisions don't match values, when confidence depends on external validation. Money senses that friction. It avoids environments where self-trust is absent. This is not moral, it's mechanical. Identity also determines scale. People often ask how to grow income. A better question is how to grow the self that can hold larger outcomes without distortion. Because money amplifies who you already are. If identity is fragile, more money creates more anxiety. If identity is coherent, more money creates more options. This is why financial growth without internal growth feels hollow, and why internal growth often precedes financial expansion. I didn't fully grasp this until I stopped trying to outperform my current identity and started refining it instead. I began paying attention to the decisions I made automatically, the ones that didn't require effort or persuasion. Those decisions revealed my true operating system. Identity lives there, not in goals, not in affirmations, in default behavior. Money aligns with defaults. You don't rise to the level of your ambition, you settle into the level of your identity. That realization removed a lot of pressure. I no longer needed to force outcomes that felt foreign. I focused on becoming consistent with the outcomes I wanted to sustain. Consistency is an identity trait. When you consistently think long-term, money follows long-term paths. When you consistently protect downside, money stays longer. When you consistently choose clarity over drama, money becomes calmer. Identity shapes tempo. Some identities rush, some pause, some wait for certainty, some act within uncertainty. Money mirrors that tempo precisely. This is why copying strategies rarely works. Strategies are expressions of identity, not substitutes for it. When you borrow a strategy without sharing the identity that produced it, you also borrow its stress. Identity is the missing variable. Once I understood that, I stopped asking what successful people do and started observing who they are allowed to be. What they don't react to, what they don't chase, what they refuse to compromise. Those refusals mattered more than any action. Identity is defined as much by what you decline as by what you pursue. Money respects refusal. Refusal signals boundaries. Boundaries signal structure. Structure invites trust. Trust attracts capital. This is why calm confidence outperforms aggressive certainty. Calm confidence comes from identity alignment. Aggressive certainty comes from insecurity trying to compensate. Money distinguishes between the two. Identity also governs patience. If your identity needs constant proof, you will interrupt compounding. If your identity is internally validated, you allow time to work. Time rewards identity that can tolerate silence. Silence is where compounding lives. This is also why sudden financial wins often fade. They arrive faster than identity can adapt. The system rejects what it cannot integrate. Integration requires identity expansion. Expansion doesn't mean becoming someone else. It means removing internal contradictions. When your actions, values, and expectations align, money finds fewer reasons to leave. At some point, I realized that earning money was never the real challenge. Holding it with integrity was, and integrity here doesn't mean morality. It means internal coherence. When who you are can hold what you receive, money stays. When who you are resents, fears, or mistrusts what you receive, money destabilizes. Identity sets the rules of engagement. This is why wealth is rarely about acquiring more. It's about becoming stable enough to keep what arrives without it distorting your life. The quieter your identity, the quieter money behaves. Noise in the self creates noise in finances. Clarity in the self creates clarity in outcomes. Money doesn't need you to perform. It needs you to be consistent. Consistency is identity made visible. When income reflects identity rather than effort, work feels lighter, decisions feel cleaner, and money stops being a verdict. It becomes feedback. Not about how hard you worked, but about how aligned you were while working. This is the second rule. You don't earn money by force. You express it through who you are. And as identity evolves, income has no choice but to follow. Chapter 3. Money responds to value, not activity. For a long time, I equated movement with progress. If I stayed busy, I felt productive. If I felt productive, I assumed results would follow. They didn't, at least not in any stable way. Activity creates noise. Value creates signal. Money does not listen to noise. This was difficult to accept because activity is visible. It feels measurable. It gives the illusion of control. Value is quieter, often invisible at first, and deeply uncomfortable to evaluate honestly. Because value forces a harder question. If all my activity disappeared, what would remain useful? Money answers that question relentlessly. It does not reward motion for its own sake. It responds to usefulness sustained over time. This is the third rule. Money reacts to value, not effort, not busyness, not exhaustion. Activity can be infinite. Value is precise. I noticed that whenever my days were full but directionless, money reflected that disorder. Small gains required constant upkeep. Momentum decayed quickly. Nothing held. But when I focused on fewer things that actually mattered, things that solved real problems or created durable usefulness, money behaved differently. It slowed down, then it stabilized, then it began to compound. Value compounds, activity burns. This distinction explains why two people can expend similar effort and receive wildly different outcomes. The difference is not commitment, it's relevance. Money is drawn to relevance. Relevance means something continues to matter even when attention moves elsewhere, even when trends change, even when urgency fades. Activity rarely survives that test. Value often does. I learned to stop measuring my days by how full they were and start measuring them by how useful the output remained after time passed. That shift felt risky at first. Doing less felt irresponsible. Slowing down felt like falling behind. But the opposite was true. By reducing activity, I created space to deepen value. And depth changed everything. Depth gives money something to stay with. Shallow activity produces shallow results. Deep value produces lasting returns. Money prefers depth because depth reduces replacement risk. Things that are easily replicated are easily abandoned. Things that are deeply integrated are harder to remove. This is why money gravitates towards systems rather than actions. Systems produce value repeatedly. Actions expire. Once I saw this, my relationship with work changed. I stopped asking, "How much did I do today?" and started asking, "What did I create that didn't exist before?" Creation is different from activity. Creation adds to the world. Activity merely rearranges time. Money recognizes creation immediately, even if it doesn't reward it right away. This is also why financial progress often feels delayed. Value is built before it is priced. Money arrives after usefulness proves durable. This delay frustrates activity-driven thinking, but it confirms value-driven logic. Value doesn't rush to be seen, it waits to be needed. I noticed that whenever I tried to force visibility before value matured, the results were unstable. Attention came quickly and left just as fast. Money followed the same pattern. When value matured quietly, attention arrived naturally. And money followed with less resistance. This taught me something important. Money is patient with value. It is impatient with noise. Noise demands attention. Value earns it. This rule also explains why simplification often precedes financial growth. When you remove unnecessary activity, value becomes easier to detect. When value is easy to detect, money flows more efficiently. Complex activity hides value. Clarity reveals it. Money responds to clarity. I began eliminating tasks that created motion but not meaning, not all at once, but deliberately. Each removal felt like loss, until it didn't. What remained carried more weight, more coherence, more trust. Trust is the bridge between value and money. Value without trust stays theoretical. Trust without value collapses. Activity rarely builds trust. Consistency does. Consistency is value expressed repeatedly. Money reads consistency as reliability. Reliability invites capital. This is why scattered brilliance rarely compounds, and steady usefulness often does. I also noticed how activity-based thinking distorts time. It makes short-term results feel urgent and long-term outcomes feel abstract. Value-based thinking reverses that. Long-term usefulness becomes tangible. Short-term noise loses its grip. Money aligns with the long-term because it is inherently long-term. Even quick money depends on systems built over time. There is no shortcut around that truth. Activity-focused work seeks immediate reward. Value-focused work accepts delayed compensation. Delayed compensation is not sacrifice, it's sequencing. Value first, money later. When you reverse that order, systems break. This rule also reframes effort. Effort is not meaningless, but effort is not the metric. Effort is fuel. Value is direction. Fuel without direction burns out. Direction without fuel stalls. But money only responds when both align. I stopped trying to justify effort. I started justifying value. If something didn't clearly add value, I questioned its place, no matter how busy it made me feel. This discipline was uncomfortable, but it was clarifying. Clarity reduces friction. Friction repels money. Money prefers environments where value is obvious and sustained. This is why repetition matters more than intensity. Value repeated becomes reliability. Reliability becomes trust. Trust becomes flow. Flow is where money behaves best. Activity interrupts flow. Value creates it. I also learned that value is contextual. Something valuable in one environment may be irrelevant in another. Money responds to fit. Fit requires observation, not force. When you align value with context, money has fewer reasons to resist. This alignment cannot be rushed. Rushing value cheapens it. Letting value mature strengthens it. This patience is not passive, it's deliberate restraint. Restraint preserves quality. Quality attracts capital. At some point, I realized that money never asked me to do more. It asked me to matter more. Not louder, not faster, deeper. That shift changed how I approached everything. Work became quieter. Decisions became simpler. Money became less dramatic. When value leads, money follows calmly. When activity leads, money arrives anxiously, or not at all. This is the third rule. Money does not reward movement. It rewards meaning that lasts. And once you build something that continues to matter without your constant involvement, money has no choice but to respond. Chapter 4. Wealth begins where time dependency ends. There was a point when I realized that time was quietly controlling every financial decision I made. Not dramatically, not obviously, but persistently. Money arrived only when I was present. When I stopped, it stopped. That pattern felt normal, until it didn't. Because anything tied completely to time is fragile. Time is finite. Energy fluctuates. Attention fades. Yet wealth, by its nature, needs continuity. This is where the fourth rule reveals itself. Wealth begins at the moment. Income no longer depends entirely on your time. This isn't about working less. It's about understanding the limits of exchange. Time for money trades cap upside. They reward endurance, not design. And endurance always runs out. I didn't understand this at first because time dependency hides behind responsibility. Showing up feels noble. Being needed feels validating. But dependence is not the same as value. If your absence collapses the system isn't wealth. It's labor wearing a better suit. Money does not flow freely where continuity breaks the moment you step away. This isn't a criticism of work. It's an observation of structure. Time-dependent income creates urgency. Urgency narrows thinking. Narrow thinking invites short-term decisions, and short-term decisions keep income attached to time. The loop sustains itself. Breaking it requires a different orientation, not toward effort, but toward leverage. Leverage is often misunderstood as risk. In reality, leverage is design. It is the ability to create outcomes that persist beyond your immediate presence. When I began to see leverage this way, my priorities shifted. I stopped asking how much I could produce today and started asking what could continue producing tomorrow. That question changes behavior. It forces patience. It demands clarity. It discourages shortcuts. Because shortcuts rely on presence. Design survives absence. Money prefers design. Design reduces dependency. Dependency creates friction. This rule explains why some people appear calm around time. Their income is not constantly racing the clock. Their decisions are not hostage to the next hour. That calm is not laziness. It's architecture. Architecture outlives effort. When income is time-bound, rest feels expensive. When income is decoupled from time, rest becomes strategic. This distinction reshapes life. I noticed that as soon as I reduced time dependency, even slightly, decision quality improved. I stopped forcing urgency into places it didn't belong. I stopped confusing motion with progress. Money responded. Not explosively, but predictably. Predictability is a form of freedom. Time dependency also distorts self-worth. When money arrives only through presence, absence feels like failure. Rest feels like loss. Slowness feels irresponsible. That mindset is unsustainable. Wealth does not punish rest. It requires it. Systems need space to stabilize. Design needs distance to reveal flaws. Time-bound income rarely allows either. This is why wealth often feels incompatible with exhaustion. Exhaustion signals that the system relies too heavily on the human element. Humans tire. Systems persist. Money aligns with persistence. Reducing time dependency does not mean removing yourself entirely. It means shifting your role, from executor to architect, from operator to designer. This shift is subtle but profound. Architects think in systems, operators think in tasks. Tasks end, systems continue. Money respects continuation. I began paying attention to how many decisions required my constant input. Each one represented dependency. Dependency creates fragility. Fragility repels capital. Capital seeks environments where outcomes are not overly sensitive to a single variable. Time-bound income is sensitive to one variable. You. Remove the variable. Remove the income. That's not wealth. That's vulnerability. The moment I saw this clearly, I stopped romanticizing hustle. Hustle produces output. It does not produce leverage. Leverage requires restraint. You must resist the urge to solve everything personally. You must allow processes to mature without intervention. This restraint feels uncomfortable at first. It feels like letting go of control. But control is not stability. Stability comes from systems that function without supervision. Money prefers those systems because they scale without tension. Time does not scale. Systems do. This rule also reframes ambition. Ambition is not about doing more. It's about designing better. Better structures, better sequences, better containers for value. Once I understood this, my work slowed down, but my outcomes improved. I invested more time up front so that less time was required later. That trade is the foundation of wealth. Front-loaded effort for long-term release. Short-term intensity for long-term continuity. Money aligns with this exchange Because it mirrors how value is created. Value compounds when maintenance decreases. Time dependency increases maintenance. Leverage reduces it. This is why financial independence is not about numbers. It's about dependency ratios. How much of your life is required to keep income alive? The lower the ratio, the higher the freedom. Freedom is not absence of work. It's absence of urgency. Urgency fades when time is no longer the bottleneck. This rule also explains why some people earn more yet feel trapped. Their income is high, but dependency is higher. Scale without leverage amplifies pressure. Pressure eventually cracks systems. Money avoids cracks. When you design for continuity, money relaxes. It no longer needs constant reassurance. It no longer needs to be chased. It integrates. This does not happen overnight. Time dependency dissolves gradually. But every step away from it changes your relationship with money. Decisions become calmer. Risk becomes manageable. Patience becomes possible. This is not about escaping work. It's about escaping fragility. Wealth is not the absence of effort. It is the presence of resilience. Resilience requires that income outlive moments. Moments pass. Systems remain. Money follows what remains. This is the fourth rule. Wealth begins not when you work harder, but when time stops being the primary condition for income. When that shift happens, money no longer measures your hours. It measures your design. And design, once set, keeps working long after effort rests. Chapter 5. Compounding only rewards the calm. I used to think compounding was a mathematical concept, a formula, something that worked automatically if you waited long enough. That assumption was incomplete. Compounding is not just about time, it is about temperament. Time alone does nothing. Time combined with instability destroys. Only time paired with calm creates growth. This is the fifth rule. Compounding does not reward intelligence. It does not reward intensity. It rewards emotional stability sustained over long periods. That realization came slowly. I noticed that the biggest disruptions to progress rarely came from the outside. They came from impatience inside, the urge to speed things up, the discomfort of slow feedback, the need for reassurance. Each time impatience entered the system, compounding broke. Not dramatically, quietly, small interruptions, minor adjustments, unnecessary reactions. Over time, those interruptions reset progress again and again. Compounding requires continuity. Continuity requires calm. Calm is not passive. It is disciplined restraint. Restraint from changing direction too often. Restraint from reacting to every fluctuation. Restraint from mistaking noise for signal. Money behaves the same way. It compounds only where decisions are not constantly revised. It grows only where time is allowed to do its work without interference. This is why volatility feels exhausting. Volatility is not just external movement. It is internal instability expressed financially. When emotions swing, decisions follow. When decisions fluctuate, systems destabilize. When systems destabilize, compounding resets. Reset enough times, and progress never accumulates. I saw this pattern clearly when I reviewed periods that should have produced results, but didn't. The inputs were there. The effort was there. The time was there. What was missing was calm. Calm enough to let a strategy unfold. Calm enough to tolerate boredom. Calm enough to endure silence. Compounding lives in silence. Silence is where nothing seems to be happening, but everything is. This is the part most people struggle with. Not because they don't understand compounding, but because they cannot emotionally survive it. Compounding demands delayed validation. You must continue without applause, without certainty, without immediate reward. Calm makes this possible. Without calm, you interrupt the process to relieve discomfort. and every interruption resets the clock. I learned that compounding is fragile in its early stages. Not financially, psychologically. Early growth feels insignificant. Results look negligible. Progress appears imaginary. Calm protects the process during this phase. Impatience kills it. Money compounds the same way. Small gains become meaningful only if they are left untouched. Growth becomes visible only if it is allowed to mature. Intervention too early destroys asymmetry. Asymmetry is where compounding becomes powerful, but asymmetry requires patience beyond comfort. I noticed that once calm became part of my decision-making, outcomes changed, not immediately, but irreversibly. I stopped checking results obsessively. I stopped tweaking systems unnecessarily. I stopped seeking constant confirmation. Instead, I trusted sequence. Sequence matters more than speed. Do the right thing in the right order, and time multiplies effort. Do the right thing at the wrong time, and effort dissolves. Calm preserves order. Order enables compounding. This rule also reshaped how I viewed setbacks. Setbacks are inevitable. What matters is how you respond. React emotionally, and you break the curve. Respond calmly, and the curve holds. Compounding is not linear. It depends on survival through downturns. You cannot compound what you abandon. Abandonment is rarely logical. It is emotional. Calm prevents abandonment. This is why calm is an advantage. Not because it feels good, but because it protects continuity. Continuity is everything. I also learned that calm improves judgment. When emotions are regulated, decisions align with structure rather than impulse. Aligned decisions reinforce systems. Systems reinforce compounding. Money recognizes this alignment. It flows more easily where emotional turbulence is low. This is why wealth often accumulates quietly. Not because nothing happens, but because nothing unnecessary happens. Noise is minimized. Motion is intentional. Time is respected. Calm is respect for time. Rushing is disrespect. Time does not reward disrespect. It rewards cooperation. Compounding is cooperation with time. You provide consistency. Time provides multiplication, but time withdraws its gift when consistency breaks. Calm is what keeps consistency intact. I began to treat calm as a skill, not a personality trait, not something you either have or don't. A skill to be practiced. Practiced by delaying reaction. Practiced by letting results lag. Practiced by choosing stability over stimulation. This practice had unexpected effects. Money felt less urgent. Decisions felt less heavy. The future felt less threatening. Calm expanded time. When you are calm, time feels abundant. When you are anxious, time feels scarce. Scarcity thinking interrupts compounding. Abundance thinking sustains it. This is not optimism. It is emotional regulation applied to finance. Compounding rewards those who can stay present without interference. This is why dramatic personalities struggle with long-term wealth. Drama feeds reaction. Reaction feeds reset. Calm personalities allow curves to form. Once a curve forms, it becomes self-reinforcing, but only if left intact. I also noticed that calm attracts better opportunities. Not louder ones, better ones. Opportunities that fit existing systems. Opportunities that don't require disruption. Disruption resets compounding. Integration enhances it. Calm allows integration. This is why patience is not passive waiting. It is active non-interference. Knowing when not to act is just as important as knowing when to move. Calm teaches that. At some point, I stopped seeing compounding as growth. I started seeing it as protection. Protection from my own impulses. Protection from overreaction. Protection from unnecessary change. This protection allowed growth to happen naturally. Money did not need to be pushed. It needed to be left alone. This is the quiet paradox. The more you interfere, the less compounding you get. The more you trust structure, the more time works for you. Compounding is not fragile because it is weak. It is fragile because it is sensitive to behavior. Calm is the behavior it needs. This is the fifth rule. Compounding only rewards the calm, not the smartest, not the fastest, not the most ambitious. The calm. Those who can wait without doubt, continue without noise, and allow time to finish what consistency began. For them, growth is not dramatic, it is inevitable. Chapter 6. Staying in the game matters more than winning. For a long time, I misunderstood success as victory. Winning a deal, catching a surge, making the right call at the right time. Those moments felt powerful. They also felt temporary, because winning means nothing if it removes you from the game. This is the sixth rule. Wealth is not built by winning often. It is built by staying in the game long enough for probability to work in your favor. This rule is uncomfortable because it shifts attention away from brilliance and toward survival. Survival sounds unambitious, but survival is what allows compounding to exist at all. Without survival, there is no second chance, no recovery curve, no long-term effect. I noticed that the biggest financial setbacks were rarely caused by ignorance. They were caused by exposure. Too much risk in one direction, too much confidence in one outcome, too little margin for error. The mistake was not action, it was concentration. Winning focused thinking narrows the field. It places emphasis on outcomes rather than resilience. Resilience, however, is what keeps the system alive when outcomes disappoint. Money respects resilience. It avoids environments where one mistake can cause collapse. It flows toward structures that can absorb shock without breaking. This is why protection matters more than growth in the early and middle stages of wealth. Growth amplifies what already exists. If what exists is fragile, growth accelerates failure. Staying in the game requires margin. Margin is space between you and elimination. Time margin, emotional margin, financial margin. Without margin, every decision becomes loaded. Pressure increases. Clarity disappears. Money does not perform well under pressure. I learned that protecting downside does not mean avoiding opportunity. It means sequencing opportunity correctly. You do not risk survival for upside. You risk upside only when survival is secure. This sequencing changes everything. When survival is prioritized, decisions become calmer. When decisions are calmer, errors shrink. When errors shrink, longevity increases. Longevity is the real advantage. People often admire bold moves, but bold moves are visible precisely because they are rare. Quiet survival goes unnoticed, yet it is what creates the conditions for lasting wealth. I stopped asking whether a decision could produce a big win and started asking whether it could cause irreversible loss. If the downside could not be recovered from, the decision failed the test. This filter simplified everything. Many attractive opportunities disappeared. What remained was sturdier. Sturdier systems invite trust. Trust attracts capital. Capital is patient with those who respect survival. This rule also reframed risk. Risk is not uncertainty. Risk is exposure without protection. Uncertainty is unavoidable. Exposure is optional. Staying in the game means choosing exposure deliberately. It means never placing yourself in a position where one outcome defines everything. All-in thinking is fragile thinking. Fragile systems break under randomness. Randomness is not hostile, it is indifferent. Money does not reward those who challenge randomness. It rewards those who design around it. Designing around randomness requires humility. You must accept that you will be wrong, often, repeatedly. Staying in the game means being wrong without being removed. This is why durability outperforms brilliance. Brilliance spikes. Durability compounds. Money follows durability because durability reduces volatility. Lower volatility extends participation. Extended participation increases opportunity. Opportunity multiplied by time produces wealth. Not talent alone, not intelligence alone. Time. Time is the multiplier that matters most. But time only works for those who survive. I noticed that once I prioritized staying in the game, my relationship with opportunity changed. I stopped chasing maximum upside. I started optimizing for continuity. Continuity feels slower, but it accumulates. It also protects identity. Losses that threaten survival distort judgment. Losses that are absorbed reinforce learning. Learning without trauma accelerates progress. Trauma interrupts compounding. Money avoids trauma-heavy environments. This is why calm systems outperform dramatic ones over long periods. Drama concentrates attention. Calm preserves structure. Staying in the game also requires emotional discipline. Not every fluctuation requires response. Not every drawdown requires explanation. Reaction increases exposure. Non-reaction preserves margin. Margin buys time. Time buys optionality. Optionality is the quiet power behind wealth. When you stay in the game, you retain the ability to choose. When you chase wins aggressively, choice disappears. Desperation removes options. Money avoids desperation. This is not a moral statement. It is structural. Desperation forces narrow decisions. Narrow decisions increase fragility. Fragility ends games. I also learned that protecting capital is not pessimism. It is respect. Respect for uncertainty. Respect for time. Respect for the fact that no opportunity is worth elimination. Once elimination is off the table, strategy becomes easier. You can think clearly. You can wait. You can adapt. Adaptation is impossible when survival is threatened. Staying in the game allows adaptation. Adaptation allows evolution. Evolution allows relevance. Relevance keeps money interested. This rule does not celebrate caution for its own sake. It celebrates endurance. Endurance is what allows all other advantages to express themselves. Skill means nothing without time. Insight means nothing without opportunity. Opportunity means nothing without survival. Survival comes first. This hierarchy is non-negotiable. When you respect it, money responds with stability. Not excitement, not sudden surges. Stability. Stability is where compounding feels safe. I eventually realized that the most important financial question is not, how much can I make? It is, how long can I stay? The longer you stay, the more forgiving the system becomes. Mistakes matter less. Timing matters less. Luck matters less. Time absorbs variance. This is why staying in the game matters more than winning. Winning once is noise. Staying long enough is signal. Money listens to signal. And once you design your life and decisions to remain in the game, wealth stops being something you chase. It becomes something that grows because you never gave it a reason to leave. Chapter 7. Clarity attracts capital. There was a time when I believed complexity was a sign of sophistication. More options meant more intelligence. More moving parts meant more opportunity. It took experience to see the cost of that belief. Complexity does not impress money. It confuses it. This is the 7th rule. Money moves toward clarity and away from ambiguity. Not because clarity is simple, but because clarity is trustworthy. When systems are clear, decisions are easier to evaluate. When decisions are easier to evaluate, risk becomes measurable. When risk is measurable, capital feels safe. Safety is the condition money needs most. Clarity is what creates it. I began noticing that whenever my financial life felt complicated, money behaved erratically. Small issues multiplied. Minor decisions demanded outsized attention. Nothing flowed smoothly. The complexity wasn't intellectual. It was structural. Too many directions, too many exceptions, too many rules that contradicted each other. Money does not navigate contradiction well. It prefers environments where cause and effect are obvious. Clarity removes friction. When you know what you are building, why it exists, and how decisions are made, everything downstream simplifies. This simplification is not reduction. It is alignment. Aligned systems are easier to maintain. Easier systems invite consistency. Consistency attracts capital. Capital avoids chaos. This is why clarity often precedes growth. Not because clarity creates money directly, but because it removes the barriers that repel it. I noticed that once I simplified my thinking, money stopped demanding constant supervision. Decisions repeated themselves. Processes stabilized. Outcomes became predictable. Predictability is attractive. Money prefers predictability over potential. Potential is exciting. Predictability is usable. Usable systems scale. Clarity also sharpens judgment. When goals are vague, every option feels tempting. When goals are clear, most options become irrelevant. Irrelevance is useful. It protects focus. Focus is scarce. Money follows scarcity when it is well directed. Clarity creates directional focus. This focus reduces error. Error compounds negatively. Clarity limits error exposure. Limiting error is more powerful than increasing upside. Upside fluctuates. Error accumulates. I learned that clarity is not about having all the answers. It is about having clean questions. Questions that guide decisions consistently. What fits? What doesn't? What can be repeated? What requires constant intervention? Money responds to repeatability. Repeatable decisions create patterns. Patterns create confidence. Confidence attracts resources. This is why clear businesses, clear investments, and clear lives tend to accumulate wealth quietly. There is less explanation, less justification, less reaction. Reaction creates noise. Noise disrupts flow. Clarity also reduces emotional load. When systems are unclear, emotions fill the gap. Doubt, second-guessing, overthinking. Emotions distort timing. Poor timing increases risk. Clarity improves timing by removing hesitation. Hesitation is expensive. Money reacts poorly to hesitation because hesitation signals uncertainty. Uncertainty is unavoidable. But hesitation amplifies it. Clarity allows movement within uncertainty without panic. This ability is rare. It is also valuable. I noticed that once clarity became a priority, my financial decisions slowed down, but outcomes improved. Slowness allowed precision. Precision reduced mistakes. Reduced mistakes preserved capital. Preserved capital attracts opportunity. Opportunity feels different when clarity is present. It doesn't shout. It aligns. Aligned opportunity integrates smoothly into existing systems. Disruptive opportunity often signals misalignment. Misalignment increases complexity. Complexity increases fragility. Fragility repels money. This is why clarity and simplicity often travel together. Not minimalism, not reduction for its own sake. Structural simplicity. Fewer rules. Clear boundaries. Consistent logic. Logic builds trust. Trust is the bridge between clarity and capital. When systems make sense, trust emerges naturally. When trust emerges, money arrives without resistance. I also learned that clarity begins internally. If you are unclear about what you value, money will mirror that confusion. If you are clear about what matters, money adjusts accordingly. Internal clarity produces external order. Order is attractive. Order reduces friction. Friction is what drains financial energy over time. I began removing elements that required constant explanation. If something couldn't be explained simply, It required too much maintenance. Maintenance is hidden cost. Hidden costs erode wealth quietly. Clarity reveals cost. Revealed cost can be managed. Hidden cost cannot. Money prefers environments where cost is visible and controlled. This is why transparent systems outperform opaque ones over time. Opacity invites surprise. Surprise increases volatility. Volatility discourages capital. Clarity lowers volatility. Lower volatility extends participation. Extended participation enables compounding. This chain repeats everywhere wealth persists. Clarity is not about perfection. It is about coherence. Coherent systems don't contradict themselves. When contradictions disappear, decision-making becomes effortless. Effortless decisions reduce fatigue. Fatigue leads to mistakes. Mistakes threaten survival. Clarity indirectly protects longevity. Longevity attracts wealth. This is why clarity is not cosmetic, it is foundational. I eventually realized that money was never asking me to be smarter. It was asking me to be clearer. Clear about direction, clear about identity, clear about value, clear about limits. Once those were set, money stopped testing boundaries. It relaxed. Clarity gave money a place to stay. This is the seventh rule. Capital flows toward clarity because clarity signals order, safety, and sustainability. When your systems make sense, money no longer hesitates. It integrates. Quietly. Chapter 8. Money flows. Where life makes sense. At some point, I noticed a pattern that was impossible to ignore. Whenever my life felt fragmented, money behaved the same way. Income arrived unevenly. Decisions felt heavy. Progress required constant correction. Whenever my life felt coherent, money stabilized, often without direct effort. This was not coincidence. This is the final rule. Money flows where life makes sense, not where life looks impressive, not where life appears ambitious, but where life is internally consistent. Money does not like contradiction. When values say one thing and actions say another, tension forms. When goals pull in opposing directions, energy disperses. When lifestyle and strategy fight each other, money hesitates. Hesitation is money's way of signaling misalignment. Alignment is not balance. Balance implies trade-offs. Alignment implies coherence. When your work, values, pace, and decisions reinforce each other, life becomes legible. Legibility matters. Money, like any system, prefers environments it can read. If your life requires constant explanation, to yourself or others, money senses instability. Instability creates friction. Friction slows flow. I didn't understand this at first because alignment sounds abstract. It feels philosophical. But alignment is practical. It shows up in how you schedule your days, how you say no, how you choose what not to optimize. It shows up in whether your lifestyle can support your strategy long-term without requiring heroics. Heroics are expensive. They demand bursts of energy that cannot be sustained. They rely on motivation rather than structure. Money avoids heroics. It prefers systems that work on ordinary days. Ordinary days make up a life. When life makes sense on ordinary days, money feels safe staying. I noticed that whenever I tried to force growth into a life that wasn't designed for it, stress increased. More income created more complexity. More options created more decisions. More pressure exposed weak points. Money did not create the stress. It revealed misalignment. Misalignment always shows up under load. Alignment absorbs load. This is why some people feel lighter as they earn more, while others feel heavier. The difference is not income. It is coherence. Coherence allows expansion without distortion. When your life makes sense, you don't need to justify your choices. You don't need constant reassurance. You don't need to rush outcomes. money respects that composure. Composure is stability expressed emotionally. Emotional stability translates into better timing, better boundaries, and better judgment. Judgment is the invisible driver of wealth. I realized that alignment often requires subtraction before addition. Removing commitments that contradict direction, removing habits that drain energy, removing expectations that don't belong to you. This removal creates space. Space allows perspective. Perspective improves decisions. Decisions aligned with reality produce durable outcomes. Money recognizes durability. This is why sudden financial growth often feels overwhelming. Growth arrives faster than life can integrate it. Integration requires coherence. Without coherence, money amplifies friction. Friction creates resistance. Resistance slows flow. Money slows itself down when it senses strain, not out of judgment, out of mechanics. I stopped asking how to fit money into my life and started asking how to shape my life so money would fit naturally. That reversal changed everything. Instead of optimizing for income alone, I optimized for sustainability. Could I live this way for years without burning out? Could I maintain this pace without resentment? Could this structure survive boredom? If the answer was no, money would eventually destabilize. Sustainability is alignment over time. Money loves time when time is respected. This rule also clarified why certain opportunities felt wrong. Even when they paid well, they required bending too much, explaining too much, adjusting too much. They did not fit. Fit matters. Money stays where it fits. When you ignore fit, money arrives briefly and leaves abruptly. Fit creates continuity. Continuity invites compounding. I also noticed that alignment reduced fear. When life makes sense, uncertainty feels manageable. You may not know outcomes, but you trust the structure. Trust in structure reduces anxiety. Anxiety distorts decision-making. Money avoids distorted environments. This is why peace of mind is not separate from wealth. It is part of the infrastructure. A peaceful system makes fewer reactive decisions. Fewer reactive decisions reduce error. Reduced error preserves capital. Preserved capital attracts opportunity. Opportunity aligns with coherence. Everything points back to the same principle. Money does not need to be convinced. It needs to be accommodated. Accommodation happens when life and strategy are not in conflict. When who you are and what you do are aligned, money does not feel like an external force. It becomes integrated. Integration is the highest form of stability. This is also why wealth built in alignment feels quiet. There is no constant proof-seeking, no dramatic swings, no need to display progress. Progress is felt internally before it is visible externally. That internal confirmation is alignment signaling that the system works. Money follows systems that work. I eventually realized that chasing money often creates a life that money cannot stay in. The hours don't fit, the stress doesn't fit, the expectations don't fit. When money arrives, it exposes the mismatch. When life is designed with coherence first, money arrives as a natural extension, not as a disruption. This is the final distinction. Money can be disruptive or additive. Disruptive money enters misaligned lives. Additive money enters aligned ones. Additive money strengthens what already exists. Disruptive money forces change. Most people fear money because it threatens their current structure. Aligned life removes that fear. When life makes sense, money does not create chaos. It creates options. Options expand freedom. Freedom reduces urgency. Urgency repels money. The loop closes here. Alignment reduces urgency. Reduced urgency improves decisions. Improved decisions stabilize systems. Stable systems attract money. This is not circular reasoning. It is reinforcement. Each element strengthens the others. This is why alignment is not a final step. It is the condition that allows all other rules to function together. Direction, identity, value, leverage, calm, survival, clarity, all of them converge here. Money flows where life makes sense because sense creates safety. Safety creates trust, and trust is where money chooses to remain. Not loudly, not dramatically, but long enough to matter. That is the final rule. When your life is coherent, money no longer asks where it belongs. It already knows. If there is one idea that holds everything in this audiobook together, it is this. Money was never meant to be chased. It was meant to follow. Everything you have just listened to points back to that truth, not as philosophy, but as structure, direction, identity, value, leverage, calm, survival, clarity, alignment. These are not separate ideas. They are layers of the same system. When one layer is missing, money becomes unstable. When they reinforce each other, money behaves predictably. That predictability is what people often mistake for luck. It isn't. Luck fades. Structure remains. At the beginning of this journey, money often feels like a problem to solve, a gap to close, a number to reach. But over time, it reveals itself as feedback. Not feedback on how hard you worked, but feedback on how coherent your system is. Money reflects whether your decisions agree with each other, whether your lifestyle supports your strategy, whether your pace matches your capacity, whether your values and actions are aligned. When those elements conflict, money becomes noisy. When they align, money quiets down. Quiet money is the goal most people don't realize they want. Not dramatic wins, not constant growth charts, but money that doesn't demand attention. Money that integrates into life instead of dominating it. This audiobook was never meant to convince you to want more. It was meant to help you want less friction. Friction is the real cost of misalignment. Friction shows up as stress, as urgency, as the sense that nothing is ever enough. No amount of income fixes friction, only structure does. This is why chasing money often makes life feel smaller. The chase compresses time, it narrows perspective. It turns every decision into a transaction. When money becomes the goal, life becomes conditional. Everything must justify itself financially. Rest must be earned. Peace must be delayed. That is not wealth, that is dependence. True wealth begins when money stops setting the terms. When money is no longer the reason you choose your direction, but the result of choosing it well. That shift changes how you experience effort. Effort no longer feels like sacrifice. It feels like expression. You stop asking what will pay off fastest and start asking what can last longest. Longevity becomes the metric. Longevity of systems, longevity of energy, longevity of interest. Money respects longevity because longevity reduces risk. Risk is not uncertainty. Risk is fragility. Fragile systems require constant attention. Durable systems run quietly. Quiet systems are where money prefers to stay. Throughout these chapters, one pattern repeats again and again. Money avoids contradiction. It avoids environments where decisions fight each other, where identity shifts depending on outcome, where urgency overrides judgment. Money does not need confidence, it needs coherence. Coherence is what allows you to repeat the same quality of decision without exhaustion. Exhaustion is a warning sign, not of effort, but of misalignment. When effort is aligned, it energizes. When effort is misaligned, it drains. Money senses that drain. It does not punish it. It simply does not stay near it. This is why no technique in this audiobook stands alone. Techniques operate at the surface. Rules operate underneath. Rules shape behavior automatically. Once internalized, they do not require constant discipline. They guide decisions before discipline is needed. This is the quiet power of mindset, not as motivation, but as operating system. An operating system runs in the background. It does not announce itself, but it determines what is possible. Wealth is not the accumulation of money. It is the reduction of contradiction. The fewer contradictions in your life, the less resistance money encounters. Resistance is expensive. It costs energy. It costs attention. It costs peace. Peace is not separate from wealth. It is the environment wealth needs to exist sustainably. This is why some people feel poorer as they earn more. Their income grows faster than their structure. More money enters a system that cannot hold it. The system strains. Stress increases. Decisions degrade. Money exposes the weakness. Alignment prevents that exposure from becoming damage. When life makes sense, money does not destabilize it. It strengthens it. That is the difference between additive money and disruptive money. Additive money expands options. Disruptive money forces change. Most people fear money because it threatens their current structure. Aligned structure removes that fear. Money becomes a tool, not a test. By now, you may notice that none of these rules promise certainty. They do not guarantee outcomes. They do not eliminate uncertainty. What they do is reduce unnecessary volatility. Volatility comes from inconsistency. Inconsistency comes from unclear values. Unclear values produce reactive decisions. Reactive decisions attract unstable outcomes. Stability, on the other hand, is built through repetition. Repeating decisions that make sense. Repeating behaviors that fit your life. Repeating structures that do not require heroics. Heroics are fragile. They depend on mood, energy, and circumstance. Wealth depends on what works on ordinary days. Ordinary days make up a life. When your system functions well on ordinary days, money no longer needs special conditions to arrive. It becomes part of the environment. This is also why comparison loses its power. When money is the goal, comparison is inevitable. Someone is always ahead. Someone always seems to know more. When alignment is the goal, comparison fades. Your system is yours. Its pace is yours. Its logic does not need to match anyone else's. Money respects that independence. It flows more easily where decisions are not constantly renegotiated based on external signals. This audiobook doesn't end with a call to action. There is nothing to rush into, nothing to fix immediately. If anything, the work ahead is subtractive, removing contradictions, reducing urgency, clarifying direction, letting systems settle. Wealth grows in settled environments. Settled does not mean stagnant. It means stable enough to compound. Compounding is not dramatic. It is patient accumulation protected from interference. That protection comes from calm. Calm is not personality. It is design. Designing your life so that decisions do not constantly compete with each other is the highest form of financial intelligence. Once that design is in place, money stops demanding strategy. It becomes cooperative, not because you mastered it, but because you stopped fighting it. In the end, wealth is not about having more. It is about needing less explanation. When your choices make sense, when your pace is sustainable, when your identity can hold what arrives, money no longer asks where it belongs. It already fits. That is why money is a byproduct, not a goal. Not because money is unimportant, but because importance is not what attracts it. Coherence does, and when coherence is present, money has no reason to resist. It follows, quietly, naturally, and long enough to matter. Long